You'll have time in this classroom. You have time in Flex to get all you want done. This is not the class you're stressing over. No. Give me, well, today 2 mods. Another day's 3 mods. Give me that. You and I are golden. Okay. So again, this is part history class. I got to get you to the part where so far we know that number one, the desire by Europeans to reach China led to the divvying up of parts of Africa and the Middle East into empires. And so far, that's kind of the conclusion we can reach, is that Europeans divided the Middle East into empires. Okay. Part 2. Here's this glob called the Ottoman Empire. During World War I, this blue thing was a thing. This was an empire, and they lost. The Ottoman Empire was then broken up into, well, under this is a country called Turkey. Turkey! 3 times. Turkey! Come on, you gotta commit. People, there's a talent show in about a month. If we're gonna do this, you need to... Turkey! Okay. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, Qatar. Oh, all these things called nations were carved out of this old thing called Ottoman Empire. But does anyone recall Central Park and Fall? Does anyone recall who made these nations? European nations. That's right. Saudi Arabians did not gather and say, we declare ourselves Saudi Arabians. Unlike the Americans, who did exactly that. Yes, Americans said, we are Saudi Arabians. No, Americans said, we declare ourselves a nation. We declare ourselves a nation. That's not what happened here. Instead, we declared you're a nation. And there's a lack of ownership here, right? There's a lack of ownership. Okay. So understand that we now have new nations in the Middle East that were carved out by European nations, creating a bit of resentment from the people themselves. After all, you should know something, and that is if I drew a line right about here, separating Iran from whatever this thing is, Iraq, the people to the right are ethnically a group called Persians. Everyone to the left are a group called Arabs. Why didn't they create Arab land? One nation, Arab land. What? What is he saying?
Arab land. Arab land.
Oh, Arab land. Okay, good. Or Arabistan. Why didn't they do that? Why did they create Iraq and Lebanon and Syria and Saudi Arabia and Oman and United Arab Emirates? What the crap? By the way, I'm verbalizing what many Arabs said. Why are you dividing us into many little countries? Why can't we be Arab land? Okay, so understand. Fast forward to World War II. Now, we're not going to study World War II in depth, but understand that World War II was a fight between 3 big ideas. 3 big ideas. One was the Soviet version of how the world should be, and that is a communist-based system. One is a view of how the world should be from the American point of view, and that is the idea of democracy and capitalism. And one is the Nazi point of view, which is a whole other class and all that stuff. And we don't have to get into it too much, but World War II eliminated one of these 3. World War II said, okay, you're out. Hopefully we know what.
Well, because the other 2 teamed up.
That's right.
That's how
temporarily,
that works.
they teamed up. Okay.
Fair.
And you might wonder, what does this have to do with 9/11? And so if everything I said previous to this, if we go back to this, everything up to here is meant for you to understand one basic idea, and that is that nations were created in the Middle East, not based on the wishes of the people there, but based on the wishes of others, including the U.S. That we imposed our your view on these people? Well, they didn't like it. Not all of them, but a whole lot of them didn't like it very much. That's step one. The creation of nations in the Middle East against the wishes of the people who live there. Step two is the emergence of the United States as the one lone superpower after World War II. Like we were the king. We were the top dog, right? The elimination of the Nazis left two competing systems, and the Cold War is basically the feud between those two, which left the U.S. as the lone superpower. So we're it. So if step one is nations were created and they didn't like it, and step two is they needed someone to blame, who is to blame? The king of the mountain. That's who's to blame. Who's standing up there, metaphorically, right? If I get knocked down the hill and I look up, who's up there? And I'm running up there to push you off. Now, you might say, but I didn't push you down. So what? You're the king of the mountain. And I'm going to push you down. That's the idea. That's the idea that's emerging. Okay? Which takes us to, so the end of World War II takes us to this thing called the Cold War, which is really our first topic of in-depth study. We're really going to try and get into the Cold War. But if I made a list of what were the Soviets trying to do during the Cold War and what were the Americans trying to do during the Cold War, what do you think I would say? How many of you took American history or are taking American history? Hello. What? That's not right, is it? Oh, okay. What were the Soviets trying to do? Do we know anything?
Go on.
Okay.
Spread communism.
Very good. Spread an economic system called communism. Anything else?
Go to space.
Go to space? Okay, fine. Good.
Make big bombs.
Okay, well, that would be in effort to achieve their goal. Okay, fine.
Be better than the other side.
Oh my
Beat
Okay.
the other side.
Communism is exactly right, but then spread their sphere of influence, spread their area of direct or indirect control. The American was to stop the spread of communism and to protect American businesses overseas and to make our American sphere of influence. Now, I see that some of you are writing down. That's fine. You can write this stuff down. Is it testable? Yep. But just remember, all of this stuff is put on the website, which you have access to. So if you'd rather not write this stuff down because you know it's somewhere, fine. If you want to write it down, fine. But I'm not going to be like waiting for you to write it down all the time. We got to go, man. We got to go. We got to cover some things. Okay, we're going to skip this for now. This is a summary of why 9/11. Okay. The result of the Crusades, which I introduced to you yesterday, leads to World War I, which leads to World War II, which leads to the end of the Cold War. And then over here is what's the point? The result of the Crusades were that the Arabs were resentful of Christians. Okay? Arabs were resentful of Christians. On 9/11, do you know who made up the people that were the terrorists on that plane? Go ahead. Muslims. And do you know why they attacked the U.S.? Because they thought the U.S. was Christian. Okay? Where'd they get that idea? Right here. Okay? The result of World War I was the carving of Arab lands into little countries. Now, who did the Arabs that got on that plane blame for that? The U.S. Okay? The result of World War II is that the U.S. becomes the king of the mountain. So when things aren't going right, what you do is you blame. When things aren't going right, what you do is you blame. Now, there are in world history, there are two groups you blame: the weak little people or the powerful people. Right? When Germany lost World War I, they blamed the weak little people, the Jews. When the Arabs were lost World War I, they blamed the powerful people, the Europeans, the Christians. In world history, it usually goes one way or the other. Okay, it's just kind of an interesting observation. Again, we'll skip this for now. Any questions before we shift gears here? This is a 2-mod class, so I only have you for a little bit longer here. So we're gonna be very efficient here. Any questions? Okay, very good. So that's enough note taking for today. Just remember that in your world, you have signed up for kind of the study of one terrorist group and you're investigating your terrorist group. I have a suggested list of 8 questions. You can focus on those questions if you want, or go in another direction. Fine, totally fine. Do that if you want. But you're creating some sort of an output, and that's due the 3rd of February. So in about 3-ish weeks is when it should be done. I happen to believe, by the way, that I could have made it due tomorrow, and you would have been perfectly able to handle it. So what I'm telling you, by the way, is if you want to get it done, and then sit on it forever. Fine, I don't care. That doesn't bother me. I'm not asking for perfection here. I'm just asking for you to investigate a terrorist group and be able to tell me about that terrorist group in some way. And we're going. Okay? Okay. The Cold War project is something I want to revisit. So if you wouldn't mind, would you retrieve the thing that says Cold War rubric? And if you don't have it, ask me now and I will give you one. Should say Cold War rubric at the top. I have plenty of extras. If you don't have it, just ask. No big deal. We lose things. I lose things. You lose things. Okay. Our first unit where we're really going to kind of get in depth is the Cold War. World War II is over. The Nazis are gone. 2 superpowers are left, the US and the Soviet Union. We're going to get in depth about how the Cold War went and how the Cold War led to 9/11. But now, starting from now on, we're really going to focus on the Cold War itself, which was the period after World War II up to about 1990. The Cold War ended around 1990. I happened to be in Berlin when the last of the Berlin Wall was removed. I saw the last Soviet soldiers get on a train. I just happened to be there. It wasn't like they were like, wait, we can't leave yet. Mr. Potter isn't here yet. I just happened to be there. It was just sheer luck that I happened to be in Berlin when the last Soviet soldiers were leaving. I met a couple Soviet soldiers, very nice, as young as I was. So I've got some stories that I can tell you later.
They spoke English?
They spoke English. Oh, yeah. I traded. Do you know those Russian things where the little doll is inside of the next bigger doll? Those are called, what are they called? Is that what they're called? Anyway, I had a tie-dye shirt on because I'm an American. So I'm wearing this tie-dye shirt, and the Soviet soldier just loves my tie-dye shirt, which is gross, right? But he loved it, and he had one of those Russian things. So I said, let's trade. So the rest of that day, I didn't have a shirt, but I had, and the ladies were like, nice. And I had a little Russian doll, and he had a tie-dye. So there you go.
Did you have a jacket on or something? You just walked
It was warm. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Okay. I just want to go over this again because this is something where I'm allowing you to pick something that you're truly interested in as far as the Cold War is concerned. And then all you need to do is create a product that focuses on that one thing. Have you ever heard of the Berlin Airlift? Have you ever heard of the Vietnam War? Have you ever heard of the Korean War? Have you ever heard of the space race? Have you ever heard of the Olympics? The Olympics are a Cold War relic. Have you ever heard of anything that we're going to cover for the next unit of study, which is the Cold War? Pick one. Pick one that genuinely interests you and run with it and create an output, some product. And I have for you on this piece of paper in white. In gray is simply what I want you to get out of it. But in white is sideways writing.
Please, Kate to the office. Thank you.
You can do a presentation. You can create a Google slideshow and then present it to me. You can create a Google slideshow and present it to the class if you want. That's bonus, by the way. If you have the guts to present what you have to the class, I like you. Okay. If you present it to me, that's fine. That's fine. But presenting it to the class, I like you. Or you can create your own comic. How many of you like to draw? Or is there a good website where you can create comics? Great. or a podcast, or just a discussion between you and me, whatever. And what are you doing? Number one, identify and explain one major historical event during the Cold War and why it mattered. So in parentheses underneath, it says kind of what I'm looking for. Are you just simply writing about it? Well, I'm looking for about a paragraph. Are you creating a Google presentation? Well, it should be about 2 to 3 bullet points. Are you creating a comic book? It should be worth about a page of your comic or whatever. Fill in the blanks, okay? Be creative. Number 2, creation of a map that shows the area of discussion. If your topic is, for example, the Berlin airlift, which is when the Soviet Union surrounded the city of Berlin with their military, even though there were Americans inside of the circle, and basically dared the U.S. military to do something about it. Like, what are you going to do, right? And what did the U.S. do was basically fly over them and said, okay, your move. You going to shoot down our planes? We didn't attack you. You going to shoot down our planes? It's called the Berlin airlift. It's kind of brilliant, actually. And we'll talk about it in class, but does that interest you? Or have you ever heard of the Cuban Missile Crisis? Kind of a fascinating event. Okay, pick that if you want. Whatever. My suggestion is that if you want to kind of get going on this, Google, which by the way, rule is if you ever say the word Google, you must say it as you're typing. Pretend you're typing Google. And you have to shake your head too. Google. Okay, it's a rule. There's nothing I can do about it. It's a rule. So Google Cold War and kind of skim through it, find something that interests you, go with it. Okay, well, I need a map. I need a map of the area. And be creative here. Don't just Google a map of Berlin and put it on the Berlin. Yeah, that's nice. Yep, that's Berlin, all right. Okay, maybe have some pop-ups showing, an arrow going to the Brandenburg Gate, which was ground zero. That's where the American part and the Soviet part of Berlin, that's where they met, right? Have an arrow to the Brandenburg Gate going to a pop-up of the Brandenburg Gate, a picture of the Brandenburg. Awesome, right? Have another pop-up of the Berlin Wall, like a picture of the Berlin Wall. So yeah, there's a map there, but man, put a little effort into it, man. Put more than 10 seconds into it. Okay. Number 3, description of what caused the major event and what was the major effect of the event. Tell me what led to that event and tell me what that event led to. Okay, why did the Soviet Union surround the city of Berlin during the Berlin Air? Why'd they do that? What was going on? What led to that event? And then once the Americans flew over, then what? Right? Did you know the U.S. Navy surrounded the island of Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis? Why? Were they bored? Okay, and then what? What happened? The U.S. Navy surrounded Cuba. Okay, then what? What happened? Wahapa, as Grandpa Potter used to say. Wahapa. You should know, my parents and grandparents were deaf. That makes me part of deaf culture. That means I get to make fun of deaf people and how they talk, but you can't. I have cultural license. You don't. As an example, right? You go home tonight and your mom burns dinner and say, Mom, you're such an idiot. Okay? At that moment, the doorbell rings. It's some guy selling a vacuum and says to your mom answers the door and says, would you like this vacuum? And your mom says, no. And the vacuum guy says, you're such an idiot. And you're sitting there, hey, you can't talk to my mom that way. And he says to you, I heard you say it. But that's my mom. I get to call her an idiot. You don't. And then he says, she's secretly my mom. And you're like, what? Bill? I went too far there. Okay. Bill. Number 4, description of impact of the event on today. Number 4, description of the impact on today. So a long time ago, the U.S. Navy surrounded the island of Cuba. Is there anything that's reality today because of what happened in Cuba 50 years ago? Maybe.
They still have cars from 50 years ago.
Whatever. There's a travel ban still on Cuba. You as an American are not allowed to go to Cuba because of what happened 50 years ago. That's an example. What is true today because of the event you picked? Now, this It's not like when you present it and you say, well, I think one thing that's true today is, and then you tell me something, and I look at you and say, you're wrong. How do I know it's wrong? It's your opinion. That, by the way, does not mean no matter what you say, it's right. Because of what happened 50 years ago, L is a letter. And I'll be sitting there like, but L's a letter anyway. That's when I'll say you're wrong. But if you come up with something that seems reasonably tied to your event in some way, awesome. Okay. So number 4, I'm going to allow for you to be a little bit creative. And number 5, evaluate, expressing an opinion about the event. Now, again, no one's going to say, yeah, the Cuban Missile Crisis, I'm for it. What? What do you mean you're for it? That doesn't make any sense. But you can express your opinion about who was right and who was wrong, right? Don't have this automatic knee-jerk reaction, America's right because America, the end. Soviet Union was automatically wrong because they're evil. Grow up. This isn't 4th grade. They're evil, we're good, the end. America, pure. Stop it. I want your opinion about, was America right in what it did? What maybe from the Soviet point of view, it's understandable how they behaved. Do you know that the Soviet Union was invaded in World War I, lost about 9 million people, invaded in World War II, lost about 20 million people. Math tells me that's 29 million people in 2 wars. Excuse me for a second. Hello? Hi. Hi. When I said I heard total silence. Bodie, you need to go.
Who calls that phone?
That was something called Miss O.
Something.
Is that it?
It's the lady in the office who's in the window.
And I said, she said, Bodie Smith needs to go to a medical appointment. And I said, and this is what I heard. Perfect sentence. Okay. Where was I?
29.
Oh, yeah, 29 million people. They lost 29 million people because the Germans invaded them in 2 different wars. Do you suppose they were rather sick of being invaded?
No.
Yes, they were. They were rather sick of being invaded. So the Soviets engaged in a policy of not being invaded anymore. Exactly. So one of the ways you do that is by invading your neighbors so that if they try and invade you, the fight will happen not in your country, but in the country you invaded. Right? If you're trying to punch my nose, if you're trying to go ahead, poke my eyeballs, use the old strategy. Okay. All right. Aha. So the fight occurred right there. Sorry, Pinky. You're the sufferer of my defensive mechanism.
Sorry, Poland.
This is Poland. Exactly right. That's Poland. Okay, great. Okay.
Except they never got invaded.
Because they didn't exist at the time?
No, the Soviets never got invaded. Ever.
They did.
Well, in World War II, but
they did.
Other than that?
Sure they did.
What? They fell apart.
The French invaded them during the Napoleonic Wars.
No,
got
no,
within
no,
50
no,
miles of Moscow.
No, after World War II, the Soviets never got invaded.
You're right. No. Their strategy worked. Absolutely worked. Okay.
But the border states didn't get invaded either. So they just didn't.
No, you're right.
There was no threat.
We'll talk about that. Okay. Is there any question from middle of line up?
No.
It's probable, likely, that eventually you'll say, okay, I don't know what to do here. Come and talk to me. This is due 1/31. That's January 31st. Today is the 15th. So you have about 2 weeks. Now, let me revisit that for a moment. It's 2 weeks when the grade goes into infinite campus. If you're not done, it'll be an M until you do it. You can do it in April. Fine.
The day before school gets.
What? Don't do that. But you could. I'm not going to penalize you because it's very late. There is no late in here. There's no late work in here. No late work in here. Okay, including tests, by the way. If a test is available, I don't care when you take it. When you take it, I'll put it in the gradebook. Any due date is simply me telling you when it's going in the gradebook. That's all it means. Now, for those of you who are athletes, you have to consider that you are subject to the rules of the school. And so if, let's say you don't do a darn thing right through third quarter, you don't do anything, you have a 0%. Well, Mr. Probst is going to suspend you from athletics, and then you're going to go into his office and say, but Mr. Probst, you don't understand. Mr. Potter doesn't have it. That's nice, he'll say, you're still not playing. Okay, if you're an athlete, you have to abide by the rules of the school as far as athletics is concerned. By the way, that includes play and any other thing that you're involved in. Okay, that's your problem. Don't you go blaming it on me to your coach. Oh, you don't understand, coach. Mr. Potter doesn't care. No. You're not playing hockey tonight or whatever. Okay. Everyone understand? Okay. This class is over at 2:14, so we have about 10-ish minutes. If no other questions, I'm going to give you something else. Don't worry about it. Relax. It's not difficult at all. Okay. Here we go. How many of you have ever heard of the Vietnam War?
Nope.
I served for that. You served? So where we lost.
Thank you.
Took a big fat L.
Ding.
Soldiers got stabbed.
I'm handing out to you a piece of paper with 4 documents on it.
Technically, didn't we lose it? Like actually? No, we just pulled out.
Will you allow that I'm not going to answer your question?
Are you gonna end up answering?
Yes.
Right now?
No.
Brandon. You better call Brandon's name.
So Brandon says, didn't we lose the Vietnam War? And I told him, can you wait for that answer? Because that is an interesting claim that I will argue is not crystal clear. Okay, you'll understand. I promise you'll understand. Okay, I've given out to you a series of documents. There should be 4 on there, right? Can you tell me what letters they are?
D.
D, E,
I, J.
All right, Jay.
I, and J. Okay.
No back.
How many of you have a document that has more than 4 documents on it? Okay, because I'm looking and mine has a bunchy bunch.
Bunchy bunch. Did you not copy the back code?
We haven't got to this stuff yet. Oh, Zen. Yeah, same guy. Yep, same guy. Okay, so what letters are they again?
D,
D,
E, I,
E.
J.
I, and J? Okay. So D is Vietnam and the Cold War, 1998?
Yep.
Okay. E is same thing?
Ibid.
It says IBID, which means look above for the same source. Okay. I is Zin.
Yep.
And then J is also Zin. Okay. So D, E, I, J. I am going to go around the room quickly, and I'm going to give you one of those letters. That's the document you're responsible for a future discussion. Ready? So D, E, I, J. 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 Perfect. Okay. So now you know which document you are responsible for. Again, I don't expect you to become stressed tonight like, oh my God, I got to do it. Okay, it should take you 5 minutes max here, okay? This class isn't over until what time? 14. There's a good chance you'll be done with this before the class is over, okay? I want you to read your document and then answer 2 questions. Ready? Number 1, is the document arguing that the U.S. should have or should not have fought in Vietnam? Is it arguing that the U.S. was justified in fighting in the Vietnam War or that we shouldn't have been there? And I fully understand that we are about to embark on an argument for whether or not the United States should have been in the Vietnam War before you've learned about the Vietnam War. So I get it. But just try and see what this document is arguing. Yes, we should have, or no, we shouldn't have. Okay, number one. Number two, why? Why? Should we have been there? Yeah. Why? Should we have been there? No. Why not? Why? No, not because. Give me an actual reason. Just give it a shot. Okay. I believe that one of the huge failures of the American education system is that we have created students that are so afraid of being wrong that you don't try. After all, if you don't raise your hand, you can't be wrong. And that's too bad. That's too bad that we've created students that are so afraid of being wrong that you don't even give it a shot. I am giving all of you permission in here to be wrong. I'm wrong all the time. Just ask him. He's constantly pointing out, like, actually, Mr. Rodder. And I love it. I love it. I was always annoyed with teachers who said something wrong, and I knew it was wrong. And then I'd point out it was wrong, and then they'd explain their way out of it. Like, just admit you're wrong. True story. I was a junior in high school when a teacher taught us that 1,000 lira equals $1. 1,000 lira is $1. And then she said this. That means if you had 100 American dollars and you turned it in, you'd get 1 lira. And then I raised my hand and said, don't you mean if you had $1, you'd get 1,000 lira? And she said, no. It means if you had $1,000, you'd get 1 lira. And then I raised my hand and said, but you just said 1,000 lira is $1. I went to the board and I wrote it down. 1,000 lira equals $1. $1, 1,000 lira. And I had to go to detention for being a disruptive student. And I remember the principal came and met with us. And I said, I have 2 brothers in Italy right now. I have 2 brothers studying abroad in Italy. And they're telling me about how they can buy everything with like $10. Like everything's super affordable. The next day, she apologized to the entire class for the error she caught herself. And I was very resentful. So I swore then and there, if I'm ever a teacher, I will always welcome students who say that, no, I'm wrong. So I do. I joke with you, but I always love it. Okay. So don't be afraid to be wrong. Okay. 2 questions. Yes, we should have been there, or no, we shouldn't have been there. Why? I'll stop talking. Want to get done now? Do it. Yes, dear.
What do you think the majority of us will answer?
You'll answer whatever your document's argument is. It's a weird question. Let me help you a little bit. 2 of the documents argue we should have been there, and 2 of the documents argument is we shouldn't have been there.
Potter, this guy says it doesn't really make a stance on the issue. It just says that we were idiots to put DM in power.
Sounds like we shouldn't have been there.
Is that all? Is that what I can just
That we were supporting a corrupt government. Good question. She's just asking, hey, do we need to write this down? No, you don't need to write it down. Just no.
What?
So when you apologize the next day, other classmates look around, just smile, look at you.
Yeah, in fact, while I was making that argument, several of my friends, who I was pretty angry with at that time, started arguing against me. Like, I was the lone student saying, you're all wrong. And yeah, my friends were saying, no, you're the one who's wrong.
And you had siblings in Italy who were telling you that they were...
Oh, telling me like, my God, this is the greatest thing ever. Like, you can buy an entire meal for $1.
So you're saying we should go to Italy?
That's not the case anymore.
They fixed their
The Italians now use the European currency, the euro.
But there's this acronym called PIGS for a couple different nations in Europe, and they're known for their particularly moochy economies on the rest of the continent.
Hi, everybody.
All countries need Brexit now.
If all countries did Brexit, we have a Europe that was just with the virus. And also when that was in.
Yeah, good.
Good?
Good. Everybody's going to start using the Indian rupee.
The Indian rupiah, yeah. How about the Indonesian rupiah? That one's even worse.